Hey, hello, and welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome back to another episode of Demystifying Post Productions. And joining us today, live from Siggraph floor, is Simon Walker and Ellie Wade. Hey, Ellie. Hi,
Hey.
Simon.
Hey.
I'm here too.
And apparently, Tony Bari is there as well. And also, Sammy is joining us today as well. And in today's sessions, we're going to talk about the shooting aspects from our project. So if I can share you a little bit, some months ago, Tony and Sammy did some video productions project about motorcycle. And then the idea is that maybe we can share all the aspects from the planning, all the way from planning to VFX and color grading in a Demystifying Post-Productions webinar. And maybe along the way, you can pick one or two nice tips that you can use in your video productions as well. Last week, we've talked about the planning sessions, right? And I think there are some questions that's still asking what was like the tool that you guys use for planning. And I think we overlooked that one, but today, don't worry about that. We're gonna talk about that today. And before we start, I think let me point you out to our website first. So if I share my screen, if I still know how to do that, by the way, can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Right. So if you see my screen, if you want to check what's happening at Maxon, if you want to check all the events that we host at Maxon, you can go to maxon.net/events, and there you'll see all the events that we're hosting throughout the year. And live today, we are at Siggraph in Vancouver. So if you happen to be at Siggraph, please stop by, say hello. And if you happen to watch the Demystifying Post-Productions webinar live from Siggraph, you can continue the talk with Tony and Simon and also Ellie live in person at Siggraph. So yeah, just to point you out, throughout the webinars, we will share some footage and also some project files, and those are available in the descriptions of each webinar. So if you scroll down and you'll see the download project files, and that will lead you onto the Dropbox page. And there you can access the project file along with a project timeline in Premiere Pro and Resolve. And if you still haven't got the t-shirt from Maxon Training Team, you can get one t-shirt by following the link that I will be copying and pasting to the chat soon. And the code for today is creative workflows, and I will include that in the chat as well. So one more thing before we move on, hang in there, Tony. If you missed last webinar, and if you want to check all the other webinars that we're hosting at Maxon Training Team, you can go to Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. Simply go to YouTube and type in Maxon Training Team, and you'll be able to access hundreds of webinars available. So if learning is your thing, then please feel free to visit Maxon Training Team YouTube channel and have a blast. So without further ado, let me just handed out the floor to Tony. Tony, you ready, man? We cannot hear you, Tony. We're losing your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, fun. How loud is it on your end? Can you hear me clearly?
Clear.
Yes. Very good.
Very good. Sounds good. Let me share my screen and let's talk about a couple of things, and then I can leave the rest of the crew here just chatting behind me. It makes it more fun. So here let's talk about the planning, something that we kind of skipped over before. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, great. Let me clear up some of these here. Okay, so first, as far as tools are concerned, this right here, this is Lucid Chart, and it's kind of mind mapping software. So this is how you can kind of map out your whole idea and break it down. So now you have a visual, and you can make all kinds of interesting little shapes. I like, clouds for ideas, and then I like to make like a color-coded system, so I know exactly what frame rates or how we should plan, or basically, we'll get into it. But when you plan to shoot something in slow motion versus you planning on shooting in real time, or like I like to call practical, right? So practical, if you see in this corner here, practical is kind of like the real time, like you're following somebody around, maybe they have a microphone on and they're kind of taking you through a demonstration. And our plan, like I mentioned before, kind of shifted. Initially, it was going to be, custom paint and custom parts, and like, some machining, and some of these ideas got scrapped because we had to reorder the plan. So, but you can see in here, here's practical, right? You can see demonstration and custom paint. If you look at the colors right here, 24p and 30p, right? So this is like, so you can actually see what's going on versus it being an artistic thing. So the difference is everything right here, this is all real time, right? So when I say real time, I mean 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. So that's why you see all of these coded as such. All right, so this is like interviews, community, remnants of our initial idea. And this just changed, the interviews changed, and instead of having like 5 and 6, we had about 3. Then, in here, this is the bonus material, right? We had a POV drone. Then we shot some clean plates. We shot for HDRI and 360 video. And I put this here as bonus for the specific reason that, we want to get all the things that are checklist items, such as the practical demos, the beauty shots, the textures and macro. And then, in order to really take advantage of the macro, that's stuff that we would shoot in slow-mo on purpose, because slow motion just kind of gives you that chance to kind of see all the grit and all the detail. And I'll show you a few of these shots here. But we did have the spraying, the painting, the mixing. We didn't have welding, but we did a little bit of paint grinding, I want to say, to prime the car, prime the I guess it was like the hood of a car. So I'll show that here in just a little bit. But we scrapped the fabrication because, like I said, the plans changed a little bit. And then as far as beauty shots, you can see here, put all frame rates. This is something where we're running 2 cameras at the same time, one in slow motion and one in real time. And, we have our bike convoy, then we have our portraits. Portraits are just kind of like exactly what they sound like, moving portraits. And these are things that can be shot on a gimbal, or you shoot them static, whatever the case may be, and your talent's moving. And then, shooting just kind of like elements of the ride itself. So this is kind of our like roadmap, like I mentioned before. I like to think of it as kind of moving a visual shot list. So you can kind of see what you're doing, and you can see it at a glimpse. Instead of it just being a list, it's now kind of set up as a, in this visual style. So, and then you can always like save this, and I'll share this, Max, if you want to link it up in the comments later, or not in the comments, but if you want to make it as a download, you can put that in the link for the YouTube video.
Definitely. I think that's a really nice format to share, Tony. Dividing the scenes per FPS, and then also per scene itself. One question though: do everybody in the team has the same access to the document? Is that like something that you share with the team?
Yeah, that's like, so yeah, the point is for everybody to have it and kind of be able to see it at a glimpse. So like to make, let me just go back to it. Like instead of just making paperwork that only makes sense to 2 and 3 people, make paperwork that makes sense to everybody, so nobody's like questioning it. Nobody knows, how you type doesn't always make sense to everybody. So it's easy to just show icons and small text. So this is
short, concise, and clear.
Yeah, and just dummy proof it, make it simple.
Yeah.
Because again, this is what nobody will ask questions if you just this is the same thing as if you put this on a whiteboard. So if you were to just map out your idea and draw or even index cards on a cork board, You know, those are the fastest ways to get to a goal because everybody can kind of see what you're doing and it's very visual versus it just being text words and, you know, sometimes you just don't understand people's writing.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose of this. But yeah, I'll share this as a PNG or even as a PDF
Right.
if you want.
Thank you. And I'll make sure that I will upload it to the Dropbox file as well.
Yeah. And then let's see, I can jump in here, and then I think we can toss back and forth between myself and Sammy. And let me just, I'm resizing. So because I'm not home and I'm not on 2 monitors and such, I'm like, I need to reset my UI here. Because it's been a long time since I worked just on a laptop, so don't mind me here. Switch this back. There it is. Like forgetting my laptop shortcuts. All right, so just to kind of go through a few things, and I'll kind of preview this stuff while Sammy does a little talking, and we can have our conversation at the same time. You know, I'll provide some visuals. We'll just make this a single screen, and I'll dial this back a little bit. Can you see my screen all right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm gonna pull this back here. Just a little bit more screen real estate. And yeah, tell you what, there it is. I don't need the media pool for this. And I'll make this just a tad bigger and this smaller. Fun. This is how much I'm only on I never see my laptop screen. This thing is always docked. So
Now you're claustrophobic.
yes, now I'm like in a tiny space. All right, so I'll skim through a few of these just to kind of talk about some of the things that I showed. Like, so when we're in here, I'm talking about beauty shots or even macro textures, right? So looking at the macro textures, that's right here. You got the painting, the spraying, the mixing, and instead of welding and fabrication, we have this like buffer kind of chipping off this paint here, and I'll show you. So this is what it looks like on our end, right? And Sammy, I know, remembers that, because he was the one inhaling the paint. He wasn't inhaling the paint. I'm the only one that like is wearing a mask, and it's not a COVID thing. It's just I didn't want to suck in paint chips or paint particles. So, and also, you know, we did put bags on the cameras until they started heating up. So I just, you know, accepted the fate that, you know, there might be might need to clean the camera or send it away for service. But for what this is, we were it was far enough to where particles didn't really get in the mix. But so this right here is the painting and spraying. You're seeing it from like the behind the scenes view, and then I'll show you what it ended up looking like. So here's that, and then this is after where we did kind of a pan of it, and then there's the wand. It's not a wand, it's literally a selfie stick with a 1/4-20, and we just use the aperture lights on it just so we can kind of guide the light and kind of wand things down. It's like, it gives you a very directed, soft source of light. And those little aperture lights, you can pack like 4 or 5 of them in a small case, and they're pretty powerful to pack a bunch. Plus we got bigger ones, but for just need the small ones.
Just a small question, Tony.
Sure.
I think like using like a very small light source as a main lighting in the scene, probably it also, you know, you can also create the hard light, how do you call it, effect instead of soft light effect. And probably use the hard light in that scene, you can capture more texture compared to when you use like a very wide and soft source of light as your main lighting, right?
Another thing is like you can pair them up. In this case, we didn't get that set up, but it would have been nice to put a light back here, you know, mounted. You can mount those things to almost anything, you know, but get a light here to kind of shine some light on the particles themselves. But you know, if you take a look here, you're gonna see all this nice light. Oh, that's me not being trained on a laptop anymore. Here it is. All right, so just zoom in, and you can see like some of these. I'll go to the color page. Sorry, it's so much easier to demo from the color page. So let me turn a lot of these things off here and turn off.
Yeah.
Let me turn off all this and kind of drag this down a little bit. Where's the bar? I'm getting lost here. That's funny. All right, keyframes off.
What are you looking at? What are you looking for?
Just turn off some of these, and I want to give a little bit more love to my screen here.
I think the bar is like below the clips.
Right here, right?
The line below the clips. No?
Lovely. It's not necessarily, it's okay. What I'll do is
press Shift F.
Shift F. Look at that. So that means somebody knows what we're doing. Okay, so here, take a look, and thank you for that. So you'll see, the reason I picked the color page is each clip or scene has their own individual timeline. It just kind of makes life easier. You turn this off so I don't accidentally click on the qualifier. Oh, there's a really nice one in here. You'll start to see all this stuff just kind of flake up. There it is. And it kind of has this like nice wispy texture. It just kind of comes right off. Looks just literally like something you would make in like Trapco Particular or something. And when this actually has a grade on it, you'll be able to see. It brings out the particles a lot more. So this is with the nodes on. Let's go here. That's the thing about shooting slow-mo. You get these like beautiful things, and then I almost never want to turn off the camera while I'm shooting it. So I shoot these like massive clips sometimes, so you don't miss a moment.
And speaking of shooting all those clips, will you walk us through your setup on that day? What the like camera that you use and the lenses? I think you gave me a whisper that you want to share with us some of those setups. I'm sorry.
I can. I sent you an email, by the way. You can see the actual like the gear list, but I can talk through it. I'll talk through it based on what I know, and then I sent you the actual gear list. Because we got some lenses that we used and some that we didn't. So let's just go through this one here. So we used 2 cameras, well 3 cameras, and a BTS was a Blackmagic camera. And basically it was a Sony FX6, and then we shot with the Canon C70, and then on the gimbal was the Canon R5. And everything was set to log. On the Canon side, we used the Canon Log 2 because it gives you, I want to say 15 plus stops of dynamic range. If you were to pick Canon Log 3, you'd have something like 12, and it ends up being a little bit more crunch. So just to have a little bit more headroom, we used the Canon Log 2 on the C70 and on the R5 as well. So, by the way, how's my audio?
Your main camera is Sony FX6, right? If I'm not mistaken,
Yes, Sony FX6 for the main camera, and then for the secondary camera. So you can actually see here's the Sony, and then right over here is the Canon. So one was on the long lens, and the other one was on like more of a wide lens. We had, as far as lenses, on the Sony side, we used like Sigma lenses. On the Canon side, we used only Canon. So we used on the Canon side, we had their RF lenses. It's a 50-1.5, which is pretty sharp. And I'm a big fan of the primes versus using zooms, but you know, when you're in this situation, you get a lot more, you know, you got these these motorcycles, kind of. Yeah, I love that you laughed at that. You call it bicycle, and you might make somebody pissed off at you. So these things are awesome. They're monsters, you know. So you know, you got everybody kind of moving back and forth. So yeah, having a zoom really helps. And I want to say we're on a 70 or 200 RF on the Canon. That's the one here on the right, and then the one on the left, which is me. we're in the back of this pickup truck. We're running a line to like Atomos recorder, so you can actually see both. When you have, if you run SDI out of your camera, you can catch both, but there's no SDI out of the Canon C70. So
were you recording it externally, Tony, using the Atomos?
I recorded some, but at one point it just kind of impeded on the process because we ended up switching and moving so much. I had like, one really long cable and then one medium cable. So, one was coiled and one was just super long. So it wasn't necessarily ideal setup. So we did it during the day, and then when the sun dropped, we just, everything that was in camera, and that was just literally like a monitor to view inside. And somebody was on the inside of the truck bed. I mean, we were in the truck bed, and then another person, EJ, was inside of the pod. Yeah, thank you. So, so we filmed like this, and then we would switch, and then sometimes, the close-up camera would be on the right-hand side. That was the Canon, and then I would do the wide shots on the Sony, and then we would kind of switch off. And this is Jay right here. Jay was being B camera on this, and then we were both on tripods. One hard lesson is this is why it's good to have a monitor and somebody watching. I had weighed mine down, and I had something to kind of keep it from bouncing. And then on the other camera, it bounced quite a bit at times. Salvageable, but there was definitely some parts where you're in the middle of doing it, and then you just get this lovely wobble. So there's no way to stabilize that, but you can stylize that and use it for like an interstitial or a transition effect. So it makes for an interesting effect. There's a way to recycle it, but it's not necessarily what you want to do. I don't aim for that. So, when we did switch positions, didn't tie down the second camera, so then we got a little bit of wobble. But initially, both cameras were pretty solid, so we can get these really long shots. And let me just flip through and you'll be able to see. Yeah, you can see now we switch positions, so you can see the Canon's on this side and then the Sony's on this side. And
quick question, if I may, Tony. Is the native sensitivity of the sensors and the cameras, like the native ISO, is also the main considerations when you're using selecting this camera, I mean?
So on the Sony side, depending on the mode that you shoot, the native is 2000 versus, I want to say 800 on the Canon side, and it's typically 800 on most Cine cameras. But when you shoot in, I think Cine EI mode on the Sony, that's native 2000. When it comes as far as consideration, like having a certain amount of light, having sensitivity of light, and I wanted to shoot specifically almost into the headlights of these motorcycles. And I'll show you in a sec, but I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, because I think it's also a great consideration to somebody perhaps that came from photography background, because probably in photography the rule of thumb is like people normally just shoot as low as ISO as possible to avoid noise. But then in filmmaking, there are native sensitivity of the sensor that come into play when considering this type of cameras that you're using, right?
So if you look right here, right, like depending on, it also depends on the how the noise looks like. So like you might actually get some desirable noise. Speaking of desirable noise,
like the one that you just had.
It's like a disco in here with construction vests. But so like depending on the type of noise and how you're, depending on which kind of camera, how clean it is. I know the Sonys are pretty clean. The newer Canons are pretty clean. But in the past, I would never really want to go beyond 1600 ISO when shooting video, because you'd end up getting a bunch of macro blocking, and that's those ugly pixels that are like different colors. Like if your noise matches the color that's in your overall image, then it's fine. It's when you start to get like neon pink and green and weird colors in the mix, then it it showcases the flaws of the camera. So I think the key is, you know, if you can zoom in and see, you know, like there is some noise in here, but the noise, like I said, is kind of like desirable noise. It doesn't looks more like not film grain, but it's not as, you can see little elements of it just kind of dancing, but it's not to the point where it's like it's so obvious, and it's, you know, like I said, neon pink and green and all and blue. That's when you see a problem with it. So as far as like choosing cameras with high sensitivity and the way that the noise looks, also there's the Sony has built-in noise cleanup, you know. So as you're doing this, the one trade-off is when you do it in camera, right, you're losing that ability in post because it's already done, and then you do it more, and then you start having this really soft image, so it doesn't necessarily look like what you intended to shoot. If that makes sense.
Do you have some space for a question from the audience? More questions from the audience? Right. I think, wait a second. Peter is asking, is there any, are you experienced, how do you call it? Is there any recommendations for a 360 camera for making HDRI stills? Are you even like using any 360 cameras on the project as well, Tony?
By the time we even got it out, like I brought it, and I have the, what was that, Insta 360 X, was it X2? It's a Insta 360 X1, I want to say.
Yeah.
So that camera, I have used it in the past. I brought it with me. Instead, we brought the, let me just show you, brought the balls and charts.
Ah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sammy's familiar with this. How many times did we do this? So everywhere we went, try to capture this. And I was going to say, before we even hop off, or before I hand it over, I think we should go through that our chip chart setup.
Yeah. And
so I hope that answers the question. So it's the Insta360 1X, I want to say. I'm probably getting that wrong, but it's great for this kind of thing. You know, I just literally, small crew, not enough hands, and you know, I knew for a fact we were going to do the balls and charts, and like I feel like the balls and charts are pretty solid for this kind of thing.
And Tony, sorry, I stutter right there. Josh was asking. I think we saw in a couple of clips, you were like in the BTS clips, there were like tripods in the scenes as well. Is there any special considerations when you are selecting tripod, or any tripod would do for those type of shots?
I would say, like, if you're in the back of a truck, something more beefy and heavy, where like the head is heavy, and like you can, some of them have a hook where you can actually hook in a sandbag, and then that'll drag things down. I'm being broadcast while broadcasting. I would say something that I think even the photo tripods will have like a hook, which will allow you to put a sandbag on the bottom. So as far as like the differences, I would go with something beefy if you're going to be in the back of a truck moving around with the option of, you know, you may be bouncing around, or if you're like anywhere like on a ship or some obscure place where there might be a little bounce, if you know that you need to weigh things down and get something with a heavier head. The Manfrotto stuff, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty simple standard. There's also, I want to say I had a Benro tripod, and I even have a hi-hat, so the little mini baby legs tripod. And with that, you know, I can mount that almost anywhere. And I'm a big fan of the clips, the super clamp, the Manfrotto super clamp, because that's something that you can literally mount a camera head to, and then clamp it onto something hard and metal, and then now you won't have that, you know, depending on the size of your tripod head. I want to say, was it off the top of my head, is it 80? No, it's 5. I mean, 501 is the classic, right? And then there is the Bogan, I think. That's Frodo, sorry, Bogan Manfrotto. That's old school. But you know, if you have the budget, go for an O'Connor or rent one, because those things are tanks, and you're never really gonna have an issue with that. But like, if you're on the go and you need something, just make sure. I would say, like, if you don't have the money to get, you know, the $10,000 setup, you know, you can end up with something that's like $800, $1,000, even $300. It has a hook, and you can tie down a sandbag to it, and while it's you know, and it keeps it from bouncing around. So as far as consideration, if I need to use anything, make sure it's a video head versus a photo head. You know, the difference is one is like that big and the other one is like that, and fluid, of course, so you get a nice pan and stuff. But I think we're spoiled by gimbals and stuff these days. So it used to be you'd have to pull back, and there's going to be a sweet spot in every shot you do where you get the really nice motion, but you basically need to come swing out a little bit more, and then you'll get the sweet spot in the middle of that. But there's always going to be some jerkiness in the beginning and the end. So as far as that's concerned, I feel like the gimbals kind of remove that element. And there's a quarter 20 adapter on the bottom of if you have the Ronin or any of the most popular gimbals will have a quarter 20 adapter that you can mount. Sorry, like I mentioned before, I'm in a construction zone, you know. So you can mount your gimbal right to the tripod, and now you can be at that same eye level, and you probably need to adjust a little bit because it does add a little height, but with that you can literally just you know, control it with a joystick. You can even control it with your phone, and it has a virtual joystick on it. So if you did want to go in and have you can program the moves too. So like I said, the days of kind of doing these pans and tilts, or even like kind of a little bit of both, like I feel like that's gone away with the fact that you can do this with a motorized stick, and you can even program them. So
that makes the life much easier, right?
yeah, absolutely.
So,
but
before we move on, I would like to squeeze in one more questions, and I think you also want to cover it anyway. And Matthew is asking if Matthew is asking about the audio side of the recording. How did you do that when you were like recording, shooting for this project? And did you also do some recordings of audio for B-roll? I think you mentioned something about the wild track that you want to.
Yes. So actually, let me see. I might have them with me today. Let's see. They're pretty quick and field expedient. And I'll pull. Let me see if I have them in my pack here. Yes, I do. Of course, I do. So let me see. Can you see my screen? I mean, can you still see me?
Yeah.
Let me stop sharing for a second. Where is it? Can you stop my screen share for just a moment? So in here, I'm using these Rhøde mics, the Rhøde Wireless Go. They're tiny. They do a great job for what they are. And if you have like a set of Sennheiser mics, or like you know, something a little bit more high end than these, you can mix and match. And so I use the microphone from my older Sennheiser and plug it in, so it has the input here, and you can plug it in right here, and you can actually use like a dedicated lav mic. So I'll use a dedicated lav mic with these instead of using the little onboard microphones that are on it. So this one comes with
the dedicated lav mic was for interview, right?
Yes, for interviews. So if we're talking about wild tracks, on the wild track, you can use anything. You can use your phone if you want, and you can even hook up a microphone to your phone. But I have a couple of different audio devices that I use. You know, the classic one, of course, the Zoom H1N, which now they have many new versions of that, or even the Zoom. I'm trying to think of what the model I have. It's like does 6 channels, and it has 6 inputs on it. That's when I'm not utilizing somebody who's a dedicated sound person. But if I'm doing it, feel expedient, I got the Rhøde, you can, kind of plug it up anywhere and just kind of roll on the sound. It's not a bad idea to slate these things just so you can see what they are. Actually, Sammy helped with some of the sound effects, and he just did it on his phone and sent it over. And your phone is more than capable of catching this stuff. The biggest problem that you can have with the phone, whether Android or iPhone, is just keep it a certain ways away from something that's so noisy that we experience that when you're revving a motorcycle engine, it just distorts it unless you're a certain ways away from it. So
it's like calibrating, right? You want to avoid clipping.
Yes. I don't think anybody ever wants clipping, and shooting raw doesn't avoid clipping, by the way. Even shooting, when you're recording audio, 32-bit float if you can, that 32-bit float, 32-bit in general, I think I'm talking graphics here, but 32-bit in general, and you can record 32-bit on this Rhøde mics, and basically you can get anything from, like, if somebody, if somebody's like banging a hammer in the scene, why don't you just get an isolated recording of that, and just kind of place it nearby, make sure it's pointing in the right direction, of course. You can even mount a, a shotgun mic on a boom and angle that down and grab that. And typically that'd be it's a good combo to have for interviews. If you're not like in the middle of the street, you got that time to mount a C-stand and get a boom along with a lav, so you have that good combination of both.
Can we go back to the chip chart? That I think we're going to go over, like, why the orientation is the way it is, and if you have that chip chart upside down. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll talk one thing about audio, and then we'll do chip chart.
Before we move to the chip chart, you mentioned wild track before, right, Tony? Could you explain what wild track is?
Yeah. So.
And why it is important, probably.
Absolutely, you want to capture your environment, and like this is the time where, like, whoever's doing sound would typically tell everybody to shut up, you don't move. And it's great to have everybody in the same room, the same people that were in the shot, because, like, just like with picture, sound, when everybody's kind of filling that space, everybody is actually changing the way that room sounds. So even if people aren't moving and they're not breathing really loud, it does change the way that things sound. So if you have, your talent, you have, space now, we have the car in there, we have all the stuff, capture that sound with no talking, no nothing. And like just even the sounds of like the shop itself, you might hear cars, in the background, or somebody banging on something. That's the environment sound. These are your wild tracks. When you're doing the wild track, just give the person in post a hint what you're doing. Interior, car, interior shop, paint room 1, lights on, because even
like
the lights make.
When we did the exhaust, you remember you told me. So one of the things, just to add on to what he's saying, when I was doing the exhaust sound for my motorcycle, I would tell microphone, well, I would say into my phone, idle, and then Harley Davidson, at idle speed, full throttle, and then I would do it for about 30 seconds so you could find a certain part of the clip that you can use, and then well, you taught me that. It's just
actually, I don't know if you could hear it, but I do have them in here. But yeah, like, let's see here, and I don't mind sharing them too. We can share them as links.
Yeah, you can share your screen, by the way. You're a presenter.
Yep. Let me find those real quick. And lovely. Where's my panel? This is the laptop life. All right, hold on. Here we go, and share my screen. Boom, here we go. Okay, so let's see if we can hear this. There it is. Can you hear this, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So here, let's start here.
Harley Davidson Road Glide Special 2022. Exhaust idle.
You can hear the enthusiasm. So the most important part is, if you can see, it's, you know, that waveform is nice and big, and that's a lot of sound, but it's not clipped. Like even throughout this whole thing, you can see none of it's clipped. And that's just really positioning where your phone is. All right, if you need to buffer your phone, like, you can put a sock on the end of your phone. I know it sounds silly, but you can put a sock on the end of your phone, and that'll buffer the microphone as well. And then also, let's see the other one here. This one.
Can you say something real quick?
Go ahead, Sam.
One thing that I found when we were doing this part, the exhaust, was to listen to the clips after you record them, just to make sure you got what you wanted, because sometimes you won't be able to go back and get that. It's kind of like with the overshooting thing that we talked about the other on the last webinar. Shoot more and cut down, and same thing with audio. Make sure you're over recording your audio and checking to make sure that the clip is clear, what you want, and there's not like a distortion in it, so that way you can redo it again if there's an issue. So sorry about that. I just wanted to throw that out there.
I mean, like, honestly, besides just listening back to things, like I mentioned, every night, going back to the computer, not just dumping the media, but like watching to make sure, because there's all kinds of things, such as like your memory cards, your you know, the media that you shoot with, did it transfer over right? You know, when you transfer from the original card, and not transfer from, you know, just a copy of the copy. So, you know, there's a lot of things as far as like overshooting. That's like the best thing you can do. I personally don't like to do anything on post when I didn't have any alternates. That drives me nuts, because you're really just searching and trying to fix, versus you might have 10 different options. I'll take the 10 options any day over the two shots that somebody thought was good, but you know, you don't have coverage. So, and the keyword there is coverage. So,
just imagining here, because I was not in the shot in the project. There must be like tons of like shots going on, tons of like audio recordings going on, and like tons of scenes. How do you keep everything like on track? It's like metadata is also something that you are considering using.
So let's talk about metadata real quick, and I'll show you. I made 2 examples here. So basically, most cameras, in most instances nowadays, at least in the last, I mean, it's been doing it for a while. The cameras will record exactly, and I'll just show you here exactly which lens was attached. So let me just go here, and I'm going to go to, I think, tech details. In tech details, like you can see right here, let's just talk real quick about metadata in general. So some things that you'll notice is you'll see, you know, that what you know, version of log I was using. All right, so I have Cinegamma and I'm in Canon log 2, right? And that kind of tells me about, you know, that clip specifically, you know, and that the benefit of that is that, like, you're gifting, you know, everybody in post a little bit of your roadmap, so they understand exactly how to grade it. They understand like what lens you are on. There's a lot of things. If you're doing anything with compositing, it's good to know what your focal length is. It's good to know what you know, what aperture that you were at, so you can match these things a little bit easier. So let me just step through here. Click on this clip, and I'll just go to. These are all shot with the 40. Let me just got my go-to webinar panel here. Okay. I'm realizing I'm super spoiled with the 2 screens at home, but this laptop is kind of killing me here. All right, so in here, all of these were organized and arranged by, I made a smart bin in here, and I made that based off, let me just go to edit, based off the metadata that was recorded in the file. So I just made a smart band for camera, lens type, contains, and what the lens type was. So this is the 40 mil 1.5 full frame cine lens from Sigma. And in here, let's go to all groups. And if we were to track it down, it should be under camera. And then look, you can even see what your shutter angle was. You see the ISO you were using at the time. And you can see that this is shot at 120 frames per second. I know it says 119.880. Just have to make things complicated, right? So here's our lens type. And then it also kind of tells you where you are at. So there's my color space. And then
that's a
here's the
very
camera.
important information.
Yeah.
Make it available there makes lives and post-production so much easier.
And you know, you can actually even append the metadata from clips, even if you made transcodes. So you can actually ship out, and I want to say it's been a while since I've done this, but you can actually ship out the metadata from your clip. And if you keep your clips the same camera original name, then you can actually like append that metadata to a transcode. So if you were doing this with the purposes of, you know, with the purposes of doing, you know, color grading on something that's a ProRes versus this MXF file, now you still have that metadata, and now you can still use this in a particular way. So if I go here,
just on top of that, Misha is asking the audience, can you also do this metadata organizations in Premiere Pro as well?
Yes, you can. So let me see. Let's see if I don't crash my machine while doing this. So I'll launch Premiere at the same time. Let me just tuck this away and hide it. But yes, there's a pretty versatile you know, panel for metadata inside of Premiere. Like Adobe is really good with metadata to the point where like you can create your own metadata, and you can even like, you know, pick how it's measured. So to answer that question, yes. And let me load up Premiere here, and I might be able to show you that, time permitting, of course. And I did want to show, remind me, I don't want to show chip chart before we take off here. Sammy, was there anything you wanted to add about what we were talking about?
Yeah, there's a few things I wanted to touch on that kind of brushed over, but we didn't really get into, which I thought we should. When you talked about the slow-mo, there was a thing that what's the best frame rate that we should do, you know, for a good slow-mo. If you could like touch on that a little bit.
So, I mean, if your camera does 120, right? Like I would start with 120. Like I go with the fastest possible. We shoot motorcycles. Motorcycles move fast. You want to slow that down, and you want to see all the detail and the texture and all this stuff. You want to see, you know, specific elements. If you go as much as your camera will, a lot of cameras will shoot up to 4K in 60 frames. So like that's also a good standard. But if I can go 120, why not? So I even will shrink down the resolution and sometimes be able to go 200. And that's, you know, or even like sometimes 80 frames, some obscure thing like that. So with that, you know, let me just, sorry, I'm doing two things at one time here. So let's go to the metadata panel here, and I'll just show you this just to answer that question. But as far as slow motion, like if your camera is capable at 120, do the 120, get all the stuff that you can with that. And also just know you're burning a ton of media. So whenever you're shooting, you're capturing glimpses. You're not capturing, you know, you're not going to capture like long strides. I'm spoiled into the fact where I got like a bunch of memory cards, and I'll buy the bigger memory cards because I know for a fact that I want to do that. But you know, 4K 60, 4K 120, you know, and even shooting in 30 frames per second, when you bring that down to 24, has this really interesting look to it. You know, and a lot of films have shot in 48 frames, and it looks really interesting. You know, it's a specific desired look though, so I'm not going to say that's the ideal situation. So my answer to that is, if you can go 120, do it, or go down to 60 and do the occasional 30.
What reason would you use? What reason would you choose to the purpose of doing slow-mo?
I mean, just to like things are happening super fast. So if you really want to emphasize, you know, what's happening in a scene, when you shoot slow-mo, you're just capturing everything, and now you have the chance to emphasize. You know, you can see the wheels hitting the road. You can see. Okay, I can flip over here.
And there are different flavors of slow-mo, right, Tony? You can do it like in 120 FPS or I think in some Blackmagic camera, you can even do like 75 FPS or in 60 FPS. Is there any considerations in selecting those different FPS?
I mean, like I said, if I totally don't mind the resolution shift, you know, like look at that at 120. So like, you know, there's so much happening and it happens super fast that like, if you really want to see what's happening in detail, slow things down, and then you'll be able to see all of these elements happen. I mean, you can even see like the dust particles, and you can even see when a fly flies back by your lens, you know? So you just capture, the answer really is detail. So if you want to capture detail, that's when you go slow-mo, especially in a spot like this when everything is super fast. But let me pivot back over to the metadata on the Premiere side, just so I make sure I answer the question. But just to show you some of the categories here, you have all of these things here. And even, you know, Dublin Core, contributor, you know, you can put your copyright in here, you have all these extra things in here. Like you even have the star rating system. And one thing that's good about that, if anybody's used Adobe Lightroom, this is what you use in Lightroom, but you don't use it in Premiere. But you can actually use it in Premiere by taking the star rating and then making a bin out of that. I forgot what it's called. On the Adobe side, let's go here to the project, and I'll do, yeah, it's called a search bin. So you can make search bin based on criteria here. So you can see all these different criteria. You know? So you can see your criteria is here. It's a little limited when it comes to actually making this live bin, right? But when it comes to actually like digging in and organizing and you know, either bagging and tagging or just kind of looking at what already exists, like Adobe has a lot of metadata fields that you can use. So I hope that answers that question.
I think you did it, like you answered it very thoroughly. Thank you so much, Tony.
So
coming back to one, sorry, coming back to the slow thing, there's a questions in the audience. I think Katai is asking, does the 180-degree shutter rule apply for slow motions as well?
Yes, it does. What I would suggest, if your camera does both, shutter speed, angle, like it's easier to just do if you know, if you don't want it. Like for me, I don't even, you know, depending on the camera, depending on the manufacturer of the camera, I'll just go shutter speed if I have angle and shutter speed, and I'll just do the math. So I'll just, you know, if I'm shooting, I'll just double it, you know, so I'll go, if it's 24, double that 48, and then if I'm doing 120, then I'll do 240 or 250 shutter speed. And then if you do, let me see if I can pull up something here. Yeah, well, I got the. But yeah, I would switch it back depending on the camera. Like I've done it with, you know, I've left my shutter angle at 180 and then shoot, and then I whenever I, you know, bring it up to get I want to say the Sony, not the FX60, the older one, the FS7, which is the older version of that line. There was always kind of, you had to dial in and even go to, because you would get the lights doing the strobing. So to avoid doing that, you would change over to, you would change the from 50 to 60 in like you would shoot for PAL more or less. So I don't know, I'm drawing a blank here, but basically in the camera, you can change it to where now the lighting will not have an effect. So if you're shooting anything over headlights and you have, you'll see the dancing fields, and that's not a desirable effect. So, you know, changing your shutter angle and shutter speed, and then even switching over to, I just, off the top of my head, I don't have the camera menu in front of me, but there's a setting to go from 50 to 60, and switching it to 60 will not give you that same strobing with your overhead lights. And this was a thing more for the Sony FS7 than it was for this FX60 camera.
Right, Tony.
But I hope that answers the question.
I think that answered the question really well. So let us know, Katai, if that answered your question or not, and if not, we can still ask Tony about that. By the way,
Sure.
Tony, since I'm looking at the time here, it seems like we are approaching the end of the time.
We do
a lot. I saw a lot of like test charts there, like the VFX ball and test chart. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yep, let's hop through that real quick. And right while they start vacuuming, right across from me. So I don't know if that part. I think they're gonna start vacuuming right next to me too as we wrap up. That'll be perfect. So let's talk about chip chart real quick. Holding the chip chart correctly. It's on the operator of the camera too to know that it's correct. So I'm gonna take some credit for messing these things up as well. So let me just go here. I'm going to show you here. So we were shooting with, there's a few of these charts. I happen to have the data color Spider Checker 24, but there's also the X-Rite and then the older version of the X-Rite. There's multiple versions of these chip charts, you know, so then actually you have the thing is what that does for you is you have an absolute color, you know, so then that you can measure. So let me just show you, this is the order. And if you look, let me just see if I can see this here. And I will, oh, there it is, I'll zoom around. So take a look here. And you can see that this, right, matches and all the colors are in the right spot. No matter where that is, this is fine and this is how you calibrate. So when you actually, if you're in DaVinci Resolve, you pull this up and you can pull up color chart. Right, when you pull up color chart, now you can grab this and let me do this. Here we are again with the laptop issue. So let me zoom out a little bit. And with this, I can grab it and grab the corners. And just quickly, I'm going to do this as quick as possible here. Just grab this corners here. And now kind of just put all the boxes in the right spot. You get all the boxes in the right spot. And then, right, you pick your source gamma, right? And it wasn't 709. This one was, I'm gonna say, and we'll find out real quick if this was the Canon or if this was the Sony. So if this was the Canon, it's log 2, target, right? Didn't we say gamma 24?
Yeah.
Rec 709. So source and target, where I want to be, what I started with, right? And then like, where was I color temperature wise? Was it warmer or was it cooler? So when I click match, that gives me something that looks a little bit more accurate. Colors are accurate here. Now these colors will match the other colors. So
under
take
the
a look.
same lighting situations, right?
Yeah, I had no idea what we were doing. When we were doing this in real time, I was like, I had no idea, what is this? What's the purpose of this? And then doing these webinars, like I've been learning like all of this stuff, why we did this, why we did that, and it all makes sense right now. Like all of it came together. So this is really great.
So
yeah, and
again,
I think it's really great as well if you are like using this like for example editing like contrasty and good looking clips. I think it's way much better than editing log clips, right, Tony? Just to get the edit through.
Resolve has a fix for that where you can actually have a more dynamic image when you start. That's something we could talk about later, but if anybody just wants to know if, and you have to put LUTs on everything just so you can work, you can go hit a color managed and you can uncheck this box here and go to DaVinci wide gamut. This is a great starting point. I'll leave it at that. Just a quick tip on the way out here. But this is a great starting point so you can actually work and not worry about putting LUTs on every single thing that you do. So, but anyway, I hope that just shows you. If you have a problem where the chip chart was not shot correctly and it's upside down or it's in a strange spot, that's when you would flip things right side up before you work on them, all right? And now you can see that this matches this. So if the chart is upside down, that's not a problem. Spin your video around, right? Even, I mean, it's literally, you're shooting it just for a reference. So there's no there's no reason other than that than to, you know, feel free to bend and skew your actual clip because you're really just shooting it for the reference. So when you have this problem, even if you have to spin it and it's not, you know, you're not going completely upside down, vertical or horizontal, you literally have to spin it and zoom into it. It doesn't matter. The whole point of this is that you zoom in so you can see this chip chart, and you see the chip chart that matches this right here. So you can drag that chart into place. So it doesn't matter if you're distorting your image, it matters what that color looks like, just to emphasize that.
You want to touch on B-roll?
What's that?
Do you want to touch on B-roll? Do we have time for that?
Yeah. Just before if you take a look, we're kind of about to go live with some of this stuff. So I'm kind of the only person sitting in the middle of the booth here with my vest on. Let's see. Let's see if I can show you a couple of quick things. These are things I can also showcase before our month is over too. But like inside of here, like this is just to show you what it looked like, you know, from our perspective, and then what we ended up with, which is stuff like this.
Can you give like a recipe, like what your recipe is for getting good B-roll, the best B-roll possible? Like lenses, you know, practical versus artistic, things like that.
Well, here's something I would say. If we're talking technical, you know, when it comes to the autofocus, like the Sony, hands down, Sony, like I can literally move, and as I'm moving, I can literally tap on my screen and it focuses on everything and it locks on it and recognizes human faces. I want to say it even recognizes animals and inanimate objects, and like having that focus just kind of, it really matters, especially if you're like on the fly. But you know, and I want to say in some of the more recent updates on the Sony end, this one right here is the Canon, but on the Sony end, the more recent updates, you can actually get slow motion at the same time autofocus, which was not always a thing.
Oh, wow.
So besides environment matters, like you want to capture your environment. Here's some of the paint. You know, we use the paint for all kinds of things, and I'll show you. These are like transitional elements. They can be clean plates. They can be, you know, I'm just kind of skipping through a few of these here, but we will go through some of these, and I'll go line for line on some of these at a later date.
So, Tony,
Yes.
sorry to cut you off here. I think we are like exceeding our time already for today, and
Yep.
let me wrap up the show. Do you want to show something more, or
No,
is
I
it
think I'm good. You know,
okay?
if
Great.
you're in Vancouver and you're at Siggraph, you can come and see
Yeah.
everybody over here, and you know, come and join us and ask questions at the booth. I'll be here the whole time. You got Simon here the whole time, and Ellie, and everybody on these webinars. That's available here. It's a good chunk of the team, not the whole team, but you know, we have a good amount of people here. Take questions on head on. That's all I
Right.
got.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. Thank you so much, Sammy. Like what Tony just said before, if you happen to be at Siggraph today, please come by our booth, stop by at our booth and say hello. And you can ask questions directly to Tony or to Simon, to Ellie, anything about Maxon 1. And yeah, if you want to follow along through this webinar, I think next week we have editing week, right? And if you want to follow along, let me share my screen. You can go to the descriptions of the webinar. Like for example, you can go to maxon.net/events and click the descriptions of the webinar, and you'll see a download project file link, and that would lead you into Dropbox. And there in the Dropbox, you can download all the assets, all the clips, and also the timeline set up in Premiere Pro and also in DaVinci Resolve.
Also in 10-bit.
All in 10-bit, so you can follow along, do the editing or the grading as well. or if you just want to check out the project, the final, how do you call it, edit that Tony did as well. And don't forget to get your free t-shirt, and the code for today is creative workflows. You can find the link in the chat windows of your webinar panel. And if you want to catch up with the recording of these sessions or any other webinar sessions, feel free to do so by going to YouTube and search for Maxon Training Team. And there you can catch up with all the webinars that was hosted at Maxon channel. So again, thank you very much for joining us today in the Demystifying Post-Productions webinar. I really hope to see you next week in another series of Demystifying Post-Productions. And next up, we'll be talking about editing. So thank you so much. Stay healthy and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.